Because when you think about public schools try different ways to get kids educated. They try charters, they try after school things like we talked about in Philly, they try magnet schools. Those are all public school options. So the story here should be that public schools in these cities have figured out a way, one way, to actually improve achievement. And I feel like that is something we should all cheer. Even the people who aren't for choice as the main thing, they should actually just cheer when public schools do well.
Yeah, and I think you're raising a really good point around how choice has been hijacked. We used to talk about how woke has been hijacked. Choice has been hijacked. Like you can often find things that may have started in one way. No excuses was hijacked, right? Like, so there are things that we just have to be, aware and sensitive to. And I think this is one of them, right? Like it's as adults, we know that if we're in the right seat on the right bus, we're going to achieve better than if we're in the wrong seat on the wrong bus. For some reason, it's hard sometimes for people to recognize that's for students as well. If my child has a deep interest in, art and music, but they are in a school that doesn't offer that, then they may not, be as flourishing as they could be if it's in another public school that has that as part of foundational component. So this idea that there are different configurations and a portfolio of schools and opportunities in the public, sphere, to me makes sense that, this would be better matches for students, for adults, for communities. That's what I would love to say. And I would say the only part that I think, for me that keeps coming back with the idea of choice is that is always like a limited, very small, but a limited version of just traditional neighborhood schools that often seem to get left out of the mix.
It is Freedom Friday, and you are still not free.
Welcome to Freedom Friday. This is Friday, and you are still not free, but hopefully you will be freer after this hour with Sharif El-Mekki and me. Comrade Chris, formerly known as Citizen Stewart. Changed over time.
Comrade.
Yeah, Comrade Chris. Power to the people. The proletariat will rise. The revolution will be literate, and all of those things. Good morning, everybody. Sharif, there's a couple of things that I wanted to talk about today. One of them is public schools that are doing very well. And there's a report that came out recently, I think within the last 2 days or so, from the Public Policy Institute that shows that there are public schools that are showing that it can be done. They are in cities and places where many people don't have a high level of belief that the kids actually can learn. And here, lo and behold, we have an example of public schools actually doing well for kids. But before we get there, I just read something actually literally just this morning. I was going to ask you about it. In Philly, it sounds like they are piloting or testing this year-round school idea. And this came up once before in my family, because we have a school not too far from us that they have a year-round calendar, but they get times off during the year. And my kids had zero interest in it. They had zero. And I tried to tell them the benefits of, man, listen, you go to school every couple of weeks and then, you get off for 2 weeks or something.
2 weeks off, 6 weeks on, 2 weeks off, something like that.
Yeah. And I was like, now I don't know how we're going to do it as, parents, like, to have you guys home for 2 weeks at a time. But anyways, there's a story in Chalkbeat. It says Philly's year-round school pilot isn't transforming the academic calendar. Here's what it's doing. I found this pretty interesting. I don't know, like, why is it the district or who is it's special programs? It sounds like.
Yeah.
It says it's blossoming. So.
Yeah, no, this well, it's funny because the way that you describe year-round schooling, we used to actually have a standalone school that did that. So they were part of the district. I think it was Grover Washington Middle School back in the day when I was, when I was a principal, and I was actually interested. He was piloting. He went to San Francisco, the founder, principal, and used that model here. They lasted for a while. Then they returned to the regular academic program.
Exactly.
Yeah, and so then but I was excited because that was a new principal. I was like, oh, I would love that. I was just thinking about not having to worry about summer learning loss, like just this constant ongoing. And even those 2 weeks when you're off, their model was students could still come. If families wanted them, it was like enrichment time or off. And so it's really looked at like year round, where like, yes, no, there would be a skeleton staff during that time. They were paid extra, and families, if they wanted their children to go, but it wasn't, nobody else who didn't opt in during those 2 weeks would fall behind or anything, because it was all like enrichment. Like imagine like, oh, we're doing it was like camp, like what you have like an enrichment camp, and kids would be able to sign up like, oh, I want to do coding, I want to do fencing, I want to whatever. So I loved it. I got a lot of pushback from my staff about not going down that road. And their main thing, it was a lot of folks with younger children, like teachers who didn't have school age kids, or they were not in the district, so their kid wouldn't go to that school. They were somewhere else, and they were on a totally different calendar. So it would have been just hard to try to integrate that. And so interesting enough, so our mayor, 100th mayor of Philadelphia, as well as the first woman, and she's a Black woman, Mayor Sherelle Parker. This was one of her platforms as she was running. And I remember when she talked about extended day, week, and year, and people were like, how are you going to afford it? They were just like, just bombarding. And what she was really saying was enrichment, increasing enrichment. So this is really, it's the mayor. I mean, obviously the district has to be involved, Superintendent Watlington and his team, but it's from the mayor's initiative of really engaging and supporting the youth of Philadelphia in a different way, where all these things aren't closed and they don't have access to it and all of that. She's saying like, no, we want to double down. So they initially have maybe 15 or 20 schools. I don't know the exact number, but elementary schools that have this. So they get additional support so they can have summer programming, after school programming that's also supported by the mayor's office. So I love it, because it's like seeing, sometimes in our city, for some reason, transportation may not be, deeply embedded with the district, or the district may not be deeply embedded with the streets department, or the streets department, and the mayor's office may not, really engage with the schools at this deeper level. So I'm actually excited that it's a city initiative, not just a school district initiative.
It's got something in it that I think is really sticking out to me as like something to drive home, and that's the amount of effort being put into after school stuff, or enrichment, as you just said, enrichment activities. And they're talking in this article in Chalkbeat, and if people want to look for this article, it's called Philadelphia's Year-Round Pilot Increases Access to Programs Already Offered. So it's talking about it as if it's not like some brand new thing. It's just a way of reassembling some of the partnerships and programs and enrichment things that already exist.
Yeah, way to bolster it, right?
Yeah, and like, it talks about some of the schools this isn't like some shiny trend or whatever, some trendy kind of wild idea. It's just smart leadership in some ways. It feels like pulling stuff together that you already have. It does say that there was an increase of money, like tax, like 24 million in new taxes to actually pay for some of it. But some of the things I thought was interesting, like you guys must have a media outlet that's called, like, what is it? WHYY or something.
WHYY, yeah, that's our PBS.
That's your
station.
PBS. So they're running a media lab, a public media lab within the schools, and that gives students access directly to media literacy and media tools. The kindergartners are getting robotics clubs from Sunrise of Philadelphia, a nonprofit that's partnering with the district, and they're bringing something to the table that they already do, right? So this is really feels like pulling together enrichment things. For me, like, how do you make school more interesting for kids? How do you give them a break to do things that aren't just the boring sit in class in a room all day? This feels like it's addressing a lot of questions at once, giving kids opportunity to do something productive, something that helps them learn, but also something fun, and bringing the community into it.
Yeah. I mean, but just as importantly, years ago, you used to talk about a lot about like, every mayor should be an education mayor.
Mm-hmm. Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
And you often see, mayors sometimes are like, oh no, that's not me, or that's someone else's responsibility. So and just in politics, even and education isn't always talked about, as like a top one, two, or three, issue. So for her to have this as a platform, I thought was important. I forget the percentage of the citizenry that are youth and children in Philadelphia, but it is not insignificant. And so for someone to, but she was a teacher. She got certified as a teacher before she got into politics.
So she knows something about it.
Yeah, so she
Yeah.
was an English
Yeah.
teacher, I believe, and not for long, but just I think sometimes even just the training gives an added layer and thickening of the perspective that people don't always have if they just come from the business or just come from you know criminal prosecutor, that kind of lens. So I'm excited about just making services better for people, right? Like I think that's just one of the struggles. Like people are, it becomes so bureaucratic, so briar patchy, and territorial and parochial that at the end it doesn't serve people well, right? So this is an opportunity to do the opposite.
I noticed. So well, first, just a little point. I noticed in here that they said that no educators would be forced to work outside of their duty day, outside of their contractual hours, and that if there was ever a need for them to work in any way that deviates, that it would have to be renegotiated with the teachers union. I try to take this. I turned over a new leaf. I try to take this tact with my teachers unions friends. This idea of having to negotiate everything all the time is something that is impractical and slows things down for kids. And I get the understanding of being when you're an educator, you're still a person, you're still a family person. You can't have your schedule just changing from morning to night, for instance. I mean, and then expect your own family not to have an issue. So I get that, and I don't know
It's
if
very important.
administrators, it's important. I don't know enough to know how often superintendents or administrators would abuse the power to like change your schedule. So maybe it's a valid concern, but having to renegotiate everything seems to me like sometimes it's an opportunity for the union to attach other issues to this. Like, so yeah, let's negotiate this again. And while we're at it, I want like a 15% raise or something else that would hold it up. And really, we just want to make sure that we offer kids enough flexibility that keeps them interested in school, right? So I
Yeah, I
worry.
mean, I don't think they disagree with that. I think the premise is, because initially when she was a candidate, candidate Sherelle Parker, when she said extended day, week, and year, that was the original thing. People just thought like, oh, we're changing the schedule. The mayor's going to come in and push to change the schedule. People were just like, hey, that would be something that had to be negotiated if you're going from, 180 days kind of, straight to now like chopped up, that kind of thing. I think the way that I've seen it, or at least heard about it in some of the elementary schools that they've designated as the first wave of participants in this, it's been community partners who've come in and, whether it's WHYY or whether it's, Brother Bilal Qayyum's group, or whether it's, robotics, it's been community. So it's actually allowed, or supported the engagement of community members to be those teachers after school.
I want to look up something really quick and ask you about this. There's
For
multiple
Right
AI
Beam or
tools.
something.
And for people listening
Yeah.
right now, just a quick plug. I love new tools. I love things that make us do our work faster, better, whatever. So everybody is talking about Chat GPT. This is like me and commentary for a quick minute here. Chat GPT is a great thing that is a great, powerful tool that does two things really well. It accesses a huge amount of information and it does it very quickly. So it's about the breadth of the information that it can search, and the speed that it does it with. Like it can crunch things real quick. But if you think that that's replacing thinking, the one thing that Chat GPT is not as good as people think that it is in the generative part, the part where it generates kind of like new knowledge rather than quickly. Imagine being able to do Google searches on things in a split second that used to take weeks and months to do, like, a complex, searches. Um, that's the power of it. But the generative part, people, you got to stop thinking that this is doing stuff for you. That don't let it write your stuff for you. Write the stuff first and then put it in Chat GPT and ask it questions like, are there any weak points here? Whatever. It's good in that way. Anyways, but this is just Perplexity is the one that I think people should start looking at. It's actually a lot sharper and a lot more powerful in my mind. Anyways, that has been a commercial for this text.
Oh yeah,
Perplexity
yeah,
is a
yeah.
good
You
one. So,
told me. I actually have that
yeah.
on my thing. I think you told me about to download
So
that before.
I
Yeah.
think Gemini serves a good purpose for what it does. Perplexity is sharper, smarter, and more crisp and clear, and has better citations and some features that ChatGPT doesn't have. And then Notebook LM, to me, if you do not use Notebook LM to organize all of your folders that you have of different studies and research and all that, please, for the love of God, I'm evangelizing people. Get Notebook LM and then create folders with anything you want. Let's just say like create a folder on behavioral classroom management, and put all of your studies that you've collected over time into that folder, and then it will read all of those things, all of those studies, and give you a study guide, a briefing document, learning kind of guides. And then you can ask it questions about what's in all of that research that you just put in. Like it will read all of the studies. And this is the thing, like, for years, I've been enamored with reading people's dissertations, especially like Black people's dissertations, because if you are going to be Black, and you are going to go and get this thing called a PhD, and you're going to write this thing called a dissertation, I think we should know what's in that dissertation, because you are most often studying us, because you are among us. And I feel like that's community-based research. And it's my dream to collect all of the Black PhD dissertations and put them into a blender and see what the sum total of what they tell us about us now. That's a silly kind of thing to say coming out of my mouth, because how am I going to collect all of them? Well, don't doubt me. I have my means. I have a very particular set of skills. So we will see what happens. I think our dude Jarvis, he started something like a library of Black
Yeah, the
scholarship, or
archives.
some
Yeah,
sort,
yeah, the
archives or something like that.
archives. Yeah, Black
So
Teacher Archives.
yeah, imagine what you could do if you
Jarvis
could put that
Givens.
into a blender and it would shoot out answers of the sum total of all those studies that he's collecting. Anyways, that's not where I was going with this. Well, I was going to ask you about
Turn
back to
this
the
into
point
an
where
AI.
yeah, yeah. I like, listen, because I think we all need tools. So I asked AI here, how many days in the year are not Saturdays or Sundays? So it says that 261 days of the year are not Saturdays or Sundays. Um, so there are 261 weekdays in the year. The average school year is probably somewhere in like 170, 160, I'm guessing here.
180,
180.
185,
I know
probably.
ours is like shorter, it feels like, than others. I want to say ours was 165 at some point.
Really?
Yeah, I think we had a short school year. Over time, I think
Is
we
it
have
longer?
collected it.
Longer days?
No, it was that we had I think, more out of school, like, holidays, and what we call MEA. I don't know what it's called in other places, these days throughout the year where teachers are off, and, extended holidays. Our real big thing was we had a law for years that said we couldn't start school before Labor Day. And so to add days, we had to keep adding into the summer, and I think somewhere years ago that that angered people, and the people that it angered the most were the associations that represent recreational workers. They didn't want kids being, in school too much, because they wanted seasonal
Like
employees.
how you coming to Six Flags? We need to
Yeah.
employ those high school students.
Listen, we need our slaves back. Y'all gonna need to like stop messing us up. So, anyways, the reason that I brought this out was because extended learning time and opportunities usually is a thing that people recommend for kids that need it. Yeah, especially if you're really far behind. So, if the average day you said it's one
Yeah, I mean,
eighty,
for us,
about
it's
180.
always been 180 something.
And I could be wrong. I'll look that up myself about what ours is now. But my point is saying that all of it is short of you have 260 days in the year that aren't weekends. And for me, that's a time because time matters. How much time do you have to teach and to learn? Now, if we dropped it down from 180 to say like 90, that would have an impact. So I assume that if we raised it from 180 to, getting closer to 260, because kids aren't students for 180 days of the year. They're like students literally every day of the year at 365. And I guess my point when I look at something like Philadelphia, it just makes me think, are we using time wisely? Like,
Yeah, I mean that part right there, because I was like, you can add. There are plenty of places in America where our children attend, and you could add 50 more days, and it wouldn't have the impact, right? Because it still matters what's being done, how time is being used, how effective the instruction is, how enriching is the enrichment. Some of the enrichment might actually make you mentally poorer,
yeah.
instead of richer. I think all of that's important. We used to talk about like time sucks, even just a regular day. Sometimes you visit schools and people are making, like, for example, announcements all day long, interrupting, calling the classrooms. It's so and so in the room, like just nonstop interruptions. Like all of that has a post effect. And then culturally, that has an effect. Then you have, we used to talk about, would go around the country and developing school leadership teams, really thinking about like how much do you honor time for instruction, right? In the culture. So just imagine there are people with a mindset like, oh, well, to start a school, I don't really want to teach. Kids they were out all summer and, they're not ready to learn. And so we're going to just build relationships for the first 2 weeks. I'm just like, you can teach and build relationships at the same time. Because the same mindset will then trickle, well, it's right before lunch. The kids are a little squirrely, so we're not going to teach now. Right. Oh, it's right after lunch. We're not going to really teach now because they just come back. It's hard to, for them to focus. Oh, it's Friday. It's right before the weekend. Oh, it's Monday. It's right after the weekend. Oh, it's Thanksgiving, Christmas. Oh, holiday's about to come up. Oh, we just got back from the holiday. All of these over and over and over again are often, unfortunately, when you visit schools during those kind of particular times, there's a lot of lost time.
All right. So I want a blog post out of you for this, sir.
Say again?
I want a blog post out of you about this.
Okay. All right. Let me
The great time sucks. How we misuse time in the learning process. Or it could be something like, creep. Like you don't think you're doing it all at once, but you add one thing. Like you just said, you just listed a number of things that feel like creep. Okay, we just have a holiday here or there. Okay, when we get back. Oh, but we have meetings when we get back. Oh, we have PD that nobody likes. Oh my God, we've said this on this show a million times. It's like sometimes I learn a thing and I just want to say it over and over again. I have never met an educator who said to me they think that PD is good. Like it's almost like how kids say they hate school lunch. Uh, that's how teachers that I have talked to, and I'm being extreme. I'm sure there's some good PD out
Yeah,
there.
there's good PD, but they often are forced to go to PD that doesn't improve their practice. And what they want are like, what are PDs that improve my practice? Improve my planning time with my colleagues, that give me time to collaborate, and they're not often.
One
We actually
customized
had
to
talk
them
about
too.
unions. We
Uh-oh.
had in the contract one time that administrators could not read read things to staff. But I was just like, wait a minute, how bad was it that people are like, standing up in front of a meeting, reading a memo that was already in their mailbox? This is before email, right? When I first started teaching. And I'm like, how bad was it where they said, we're going to put that in the contract? You know what I mean? administrators cannot read to staff, just like, yo.
That is
I'm
wild.
like, and mind you, like I'm 21, I'm like, God, that's some dumb shit. Like, why, because somebody actually said it to administrator, don't forget, you can't read to us. And I'm like,
Yeah.
what's that all about? You know what I mean? They're like, that's against that's a contractual violation.
That
But
is
it was so funny to me.
bureaucracy. Like that's where things. So first of all, yes, please get this blog post out around the misuse of time and the time sucks. That illustrates for civilians and non-people just how little we think about the technical operations of schools. Like it matters, like how you use your time.
Oh yeah,
So
these
yeah,
systems matter. Now you add in someone who's absent 10 days on top of that,
you
like
mean staff
staff
members?
or student.
Yeah, yeah.
Right, like this is it's a lot of systems behind the scene that, like, when they're not integrated, thoughtful, thinking about students and their learning and the culture and the support of staff, it can be chaotic and people not even realizing. They're just like, oh yeah, go to school, and these may not come out in the all the details of like what happens minute by minute, day by day.
That's crazy. Like that's like it's a lot to think about. Okay, so I want to transition to a point that's related to what we just said. And I promise that we're going to get to the public schools that are doing well in cities. I visited two schools this week. They were
Look
both
at you, you
Montessori
on a
schools.
tear, bro. I love
So
it.
listen, I just want to tell everybody watching. I said this when I was at a school in Houston because I was watching. I visited a school in Houston that is started by a former NASA dude who started a school named after his parents because they were such great Black educators in the city of Houston. And he has this big, beautiful complex. Um, uh, the school looks like a place where children should go. It looks almost like a junior college. So, and he raised the money to make it and everything. And my point that I made, I walked around that school and did a TikTok saying, if you don't visit schools, please do. Right. So as just as citizens, as voters, do it like every now and then because you're going to have to vote on issues related to education. And it's nice that you visit because you can learn some things on the spot that you just don't know. You can read about things, you can read about policies and all that. But when you go to a school and look at the kids and look at the systems and how things are being done, it will make you more informed as a voter. So I have been saying this for years. I love school visits because I learned so much. But this week I visited two Montessoris that start at 33 months. So you can start your kids at 33 months as long as they're potty trained. And I have joked about Montessori for years without 100% knowing what Montessori actually is. Just in my mind, I had a stereotype of it being like a bunch of kids rolling around on the ground, eating paste and smearing like paint on the walls. Right? That was.
Oh, Montessori like that. Montessori like.
I used to joke about Montessori being like, that's a bunch of white kids like, flinging boogers and stuff. And actually, the truth is, this is what happens when you're a civilian. Sometimes you think things, and it's based on something that it's just based upon your gap of knowledge. So again, it's a good reason to visit. I visited a school in Minneapolis and one in St. Paul, both Montessori's, both start at 33 years. And what I saw in this school, so first of all, Sharif, my number one big takeaway is that I'm a bad parent. So that's my number one big
Montessori will
takeaway.
have you thinking that. I mean, it's
Lord.
yeah.
And it'll be right because
Mm.
so what I saw are babies in a classroom where everything is at their level and their size. And these are babies that when it comes to the majority of their day, the open time that they have, it's not playtime, it's really work time. So they do little work. They go throughout their room. They are allowed to do things like, cut cucumbers and cut up fruit and stir things and whatever unguided by adults. Like the adults have to sit at their level and have to not be like authoritarian over them. But these kids learn how to clean up after themselves, wash their hands, wash their dishes. A lot of those videos that we see in Japan of the kids that like really take care of the school and the learning space. The Montessori schools that I visited, that space is considered their space. So the parents don't even come in. The adults don't even come into the because that room, that learning room, this is like a one schoolroom, schoolhouse, one room schoolhouse model. And the schoolhouse is theirs and it's all at their level. Everything, the wash, everything is at their level. So the adults have to come down to their level even when they talk to them. You can't talk over the kids. You have to like get down, squash down. So teachers take a knee all day long and they talk to kids at their own level. So the kids have this sense of agency and empowerment and control. And it's not loud and outrageous. They have systems in place. So I thought it was like a free for all. I thought that was the concept of Montessori, is that it was just like a free for all, right? And what it
Just
is
wilding out, like
yes,
you
that's what
thought
I
it was
thought it
like
was,
Lord of the Flies for
bruh.
preschoolers.
I just thought it was a bunch of kids running with scissors. And what it turns out is it's a lot of freedom for the kids with a lot of responsibility and agency. So these kids are able, I talk to parents, has this changed things at home with these kids? And they're like, yes, because now when they get out of bed, they make their bed right away. They fold their napkins, they fold their blankets, they do all this stuff. And other people remark about that. Like, oh my God, I can't believe your kids are like so orderly right now with all of that. I thought to myself, anyways, not to go on and on about the school, but what I thought about it was number one, I always think about what are the implications for Black kids when I see these different ways of doing things. Now, these were very diverse schools. As a matter of fact, white kids were the minority at both of these schools, the extreme minority. At both of these schools. The first school that I visited, the majority were Latino, and then there were Black kids, and there was one Russian kid. This kid actually, all the kids learned Spanish in this one school at an early age, and there was one kid that was Russian, and he spoke three languages: English, Russian, and he learned Spanish by being at that school. But kids of color were the overwhelming majority in both of these schools. And in the second school, it was more of a mix. It was like Asian kids, Black kids, Latino kids, with probably one or two white kids.
Yeah, increasing level of access to it. Listen, Dr. Sabater, I forget exactly how to pronounce his name, and Maya Blankenship are two folks
Oh
who are
yeah.
working directly with Black Montessori. Maya has helped launch a couple wildflower schools here in Philadelphia that I'm just. Only sad part is like my kids are now too old for it, but fortunately they were
Okay, Sharif, that's what I
they
was saying. I'm a bad parent because I was like, where
oh
was
yeah.
I when my
Oh yeah, I just
kids
want them to
was
go through that again. So mine
yeah.
did go through it when they were younger. Yeah, that was and I just like everything you described. I just loved how when we talk about student centeredness, and then you go into a building and nothing is about the student. It's all about the adult. Where the Montessori really pushes and challenges. I think the critique of Montessori that it wasn't accessible, the training, it's expensive to become certified. So Black educators didn't have access to it. It wouldn't you wouldn't find them often in our community. So Black parents and children didn't have access to it. But shout out to folks who are like breaking down those walls and barriers. And what, so much of it just reminded me of like what community Black community schools also look like a lot of times at the younger levels, the exploratory, the openness, the connectivity to kind of expeditional type learning, having outdoors, really homeschool. Like what were Black homeschoolers doing? And I
This
remember
is
my
like
mom Black
homeschool
homeschool,
with the
and
whole
they were
adult,
raising
bro.
chickens, planting raspberries, going to the museum, doing all those kind of things. So yeah.
I'm not trying to do all that. I'm
You're
just
like,
not,
where's
bro.
the traditional
Uh-uh.
buildings? So.
Well, the thing I loved about these schools was it had the elements of that, but someone else was doing it.
Yeah.
Right? I got to bring my kids there and drop
You're
them
like,
off.
come tell me
Yeah.
about it later. Yeah.
You
My
know.
sister, I don't know if you ever connected with Hydra Z. She started
Mm-mm.
like something very similar, in Philly, just with Black families. I forget what she called it, but it was built off of that type of model. So she started a school, before
So
the pandemic.
it's funny that you mentioned Maya School, because these two schools were wildflower schools.
Okay.
Yeah, so they're part of the Wildflower Network. And I thought about you while I was there because, I'm interviewing them. So I'm learning more about the model. The model is that you have no more than, I think, 30 students in a school. The school has to be started by an educator with parents. So you can start one of these schools wherever you're at, Wildflower School, but you need to find a teacher that is willing to take it on as their kind of like their main thing. But when it got to the teacher cert part of it, it's a 1 year training, Montessori training in Minnesota. I don't know if it's the same everywhere. And they had money and support to help get you in the pipeline if you want to go, if you want to make this switch, which I think that's the smart way to run programs is don't talk about it, put the money down and, make it accessible. So they've made Montessori accessible for kids of color in economically depressed areas of Minneapolis. And they have created a pipeline for teachers to go and get the training if they want to. And they offer you the support. If you want to start one of these schools, they offer you the hand holding all day long throughout the process to actually get one of these schools started. And for people listening, these are public schools. These are not private schools. Oftentimes, Montessori is private, and these are actually public schools that start. Listen, I could go on and on. They start early. When I said 33 months, the thing that I was thinking about is how hard daycare is to find for people, and then high quality daycare. If you're going to put your kids in somewhere, I couldn't think of a better place to put them than here because it's not just daycare. It's not just like, whatever people do in daycare these days. I don't know what they used to do, but I used to pay too much money for it.
They
Um,
still do. I mean, it's
the charge,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
it's
The
still not
charge is
cheap. So
no joke. So yeah.
all right. Well, that leads into our next discussion because those are public schools that I just mentioned. And there's a report out by the Progressive Policy Institute called Searching for the Tipping Point Scaling Up Public School Choice Spurs Citywide Gains. And it focuses on the impact of expanding public schools that are charter or charter like schools in cities where there are more than 1/3 of students are enrolled in these schools. And the findings were that they are citywide gains. The cities that have expanded these public school options, especially with more than 33% charter school enrollment, have seen low income students begin to catch up to statewide performance levels. It's closing the achievement gap. So, in 10 cities with significant charter school enrollment, low income students have made notable progress in closing the academic achievement gap compared to students statewide. And they've narrowed this gap by 25 to 40%, which is that's huge. Positive spillover effects, to have these schools actually push the traditional schools to improve. So having these different, site-based public schools in the system actually pulled everybody along. And in specific cases, there was bigger impact. So Camden, New Jersey, and Indianapolis are highlighted as examples where the expansion of charter schools significantly improved educational outcomes for low income students. So I bring this up because, well, and actually, I'm sorry, one more thing. Charter schools and public school systems, there was no draining of resources between the two, and that was one of the findings of the report. Uh, I bring this up for a couple reasons. Number one, you ran a school in a charter school. I don't like the framing of this report. I don't like the framing of this report being about choice or choice schools because choice is not the thing that made the difference. Parents' ability to choose a different school has never been the reason why improvement has improved, and it never will be. And I'm saying this as a former choice person. It's nice to have choices, but if your choices are crappy, what good is choice, right? So we have cities that are high choice places where the choices are absolute crap. So
100%.
choice isn't the thing. Actually, methodology, pedagogy, program, the way that you do things, that's actually associated with different learning gains. Or I mean, for instance, if you switch from the old reading stuff to the science of reading and stuff, there's an assumption that it's going to get better because one's based on science. That has nothing to do with choice. That has to do with pedagogical choices and decisions of a school. But so I don't want to hammer on that too much, but I do think it's going to turn people off to frame these gains as being anything other than public school gains. Because when you think about public schools try different ways to get kids educated. They try charters, they try after school things like we talked about in Philly. They try magnet schools. Those are all public school options. So the story here should be that public schools in these cities have figured out a way, one way, to actually improve achievement. And I feel like that is something we should all cheer, even the people who aren't for like choice as the main thing. They should actually just cheer when public schools do well.
Yeah, yeah,
What do you
and
think?
I think you're raising a really good point around, just like how choice has been hijacked. We used to talk about how woke has been hijacked. Choice has been hijacked. Like you can often find things that may have started in one way. No excuses was hijacked, right? Like so, there are things that we just have to be, aware and sensitive to. And I think this is one of them, right? Like it's as adults, we know that if we're in the right seat on the right bus, we're going to achieve better than if we're in the wrong seat on the wrong bus. And for some reason, it's hard sometimes for people to recognize that's for students as well. And just as you gave this example, like if my student, my child, has a deep interest in art and music, but they are in a school that doesn't offer that, then they may not, be as flourishing as they could be if it's in another public school that has that as part of the foundational component. And there are different ways and different things. And sometimes that's a school or academy within the school. Sometimes it's not. But like those kind of, if we're talking about choices, really like what are the options, opportunities, back to like enrichment, but during the day type of enrichment that students might have access to. They may have a level of expertise what the adults might be in a particular type of setting. And at the same time, obviously, we want every school to have as many options as possible, but that's not always how it goes out. So this idea that there are different configurations and a portfolio of schools and opportunities in the public, sphere, to me makes sense that this would be better matches for students, for adults, for communities. That's what I would love to say. And I would say that only part that I think, for me that keeps coming back with the idea of choice is that there's is always like a limited, very small, but a limited version of just traditional neighborhood schools that often seem to get left out of the mix. And that would be, that's my kind of push and challenge for all of the space, however we talk about the public school portfolio. Sometimes there seems to be city by city places where there are neighborhood schools that have often been stripped of the specialization that may have gone in there, because now those are separate schools. So when I went to Overbrook, we had an amazing art program. Like, I mean, these are like top-notch artists, students interested in art who were in the program. Top-notch music program, but those were whittled away, but the art and music magnet school was bolstered, and that was amazing, right? But then it was like kids who stayed at Overbrook were bereft of these opportunities, kind of thing. So that, I would say like we need all of that, and we have to make sure that we don't have these, 10 schools left that have nothing. They're a skeleton version of yesteryear, but we have amazing other opportunities. So I think that's still the challenge that we have to fight through. But it doesn't surprise me that in the places that people are creating more specialization, that everyone is, that there's, more rapid improvement. So I'm looking forward to reading that article.
You have to like drill down to which part of this scheme actually makes for the gains. Is it that it's a charter, or is it that it's a site-based management, or is it specific ways that they teach math and reading, or is it the fact that they are independent and autonomous away from a district? There's a lot of different factors that could be the
Mhm.
reason. So as
The
a researcher,
systems,
you want to get
yeah,
to it.
all of that.
You want to get down to the bottom, and you would
Yeah.
also want to ask yourself, okay, taking them aside, what other things are the districts doing that are showing promise that we never study or talk about? Like clearly, our kids in districts are doing better in some places than others. They're doing
Mhm.
better in some classrooms with some teachers than others.
Mhm.
Like you will have a principal who will say, "I never have to worry about Miss So and So
Yeah.
because year after year, Miss So and So's kids do X." Well, have you studied Miss So and So?
Mhm.
Right?
And it's
Um,
been so and so given opportunities to lead. doesn't have to become a principal to lead. Like, can she, Miss So and So be that leader, that coach, that influencer that raises achievement of more and more students, right? Like, what's
Hmm.
her ripple effect? And are we setting her up to be a
Absolutely.
multiplier,
I
right?
mean,
Like, that's probably one of the most important things a principal could do is how to multiply their highest achievers.
I mean, you heard me tell this story before years ago. After Katrina, everything was charterized, but not really everything was charterized. People didn't know this. There were still traditional public schools that reopened. And one of them was Bethune, and it was one of the best in the cities of any of the schools. And it was a veteran Black educator principal who had been in the previous system, who had always been very good, but had been overlooked. And after Katrina, she knew all the educators that were in a certain circle in the city. She was able to pick her own team after Katrina, so she plucked she knew who to pick and for what reason, and she created a team at Bethune, and Bethune was like an outstanding performer as it was still a district school. It didn't charterize. And the sad part about this story that I'm about to tell, did anybody ever study Bethune and study her and her leadership and what she did when she picked the educators that she picked and why she picked them and what type of program they put together after a huge traumatic experience in the city for the kids that they knew because they didn't come from somewhere else? They were from that city. So did anybody ever study her? No, they eventually charterized her school after about, I want to say 6, 7, 8 years of being a district school. They charterized her, and the school's not as good as it used to be now. So this is my thing around, we should look at public school success stories wherever they come from and not make it about one kind of school. Magnets have some good schools and some bad ones. You know, like we look at magnets. I think I've given magnets a hard time for years, but I have to give on the fact that there's some good magnets.
Yeah, there's some
But
good magnets,
there's some,
and also some of the critique is like they can be anti-black spaces.
mhm. Even ironically, because they're supposed to be about integration.
Yeah, yeah, but sometimes they can be problematic. Just like
Yeah. Well, what do you think about my taking issue with the framing of this impact? Is that important at all to you? Do you get it? Like what I'm saying, that it might turn some people off from the report if we make too much of it to be about the wrong thing.
yeah, no, I think 100%. I think I think this time, anytime, but particularly this time, it requires us to have a deeper analysis, and not go for just we don't want things to be clickbaity or just not thoughtful and at the deeper level, like surface, like, oh yeah, school choice, but like what does that actually mean? What do best fit for students in the public sphere mean? The idea that these schools are public school, like, I think sometimes we have to look at like what connects with the most amount of parents, and it's public school because that's the vast majority. The vast majority. What is it, like 90 something percent of families are in public schools, right? And so that means that's the language that they would understand and be able to connect with first, right? Then there's levels of things, depth of things. But I think just framing it in a way that isn't consistent with how it's been hijacked. Because right now, when I hear school choice, I'm hearing, like just a lot of it's in a camp that's problematic, in their racial views, their historic views, their views of history, all these kind of things. That's right now who's waving the banner and flag. They've captured they've captured the banner. In paintball, we used to have to capture the flag. They've captured the flag.
How many of these things do you do? You do some really crazy things. In
Paintballing. I
paintball?
gotta take you paintballing.
No, you don't.
That should be a
You do not.
poll on Twitter. Who
No,
wants Comrade Chris to go
no,
paintballing with El-Mekki and his
nobody.
crew?
Not a single person.
I'm
Nobody.
gonna ask that. I gotta figure out how to do polls on Twitter, but I'm gonna ask that.
Nobody's going to say
Uh,
yes. That's a no. Yeah, we did paintball once one year for my kid now who's 17, one of his birthday parties. And this is the joy of having different ages of your siblings, of
Hmm.
kids. So it was my two older boys that were able to say, "No, that's y'all. I'm gonna sit here on this bench. Y'all gonna go run through the woods with these paint guns and shoot at each other and whatnot." Uh, that's the beauty of having kids with a age gap. Is that some of the duties have to go to the
They
older
have to go.
older
Yeah,
ones.
listen,
So
they're great. Intergenerational model, even in the
listen,
home, it's a beautiful thing.
it is. It's Montessori. Actually, this is
Yeah.
my own version of Montessori. All right. Well, listen. I think we should keep talking about all of these things, how they apply to Black children, because after all, at the end of the day, we have said it, you and me, over and over again. There's a specific number of Black children. It's 8 million. What we do for those 8 million is it's a controllable experiment. Like, what can we do for this number of kids with this amount of resources and this amount of time? Like that's the math calculation here.
That
Uh,
is
and
that's
and
the equation.
it's the equation, and who should be at the table when we discuss this equation, right? So I'm really stoked and excited. See, that's a Negro peon word, stoked. I'm stoked. See, you got that? You see that?
I'm stoked.
That's a Negro peon word. About the upcoming BMEC event in Philly in November, because this opportunity to see nothing but a sea of Black educators and mostly Black men with some Black women. So y'all don't come at us. Don't come at us. Sharif's entire staff
You
is
know, I had
women.
a
He don't
friend
hire.
who's
He don't hire
who's
men. So he don't hire men. Sharif is a straight up sexist. He does not like men. He will not hire a man at the center.
the critique is real. Like I'm like, we're struggling. We're struggling. Listen, Black men, please look at our job application site. We are looking for some brothers to participate, to include. And you know what? And I'm also so reluctant to and I don't want to poach out of the classroom either, because there's so few leading classrooms. So, I think the pipeline, we're talking about like pipeline, it's so, if you got 1.3% of the teachers who are men, then those who've now in nonprofit and other spaces is also going to be low. So
You
it's
know what?
hard.
So
It's hard in these streets.
you have always talked about the small number of Black male teachers, the small percentage. But then when you go to this event and it's like a room full of the people that most of us don't think really exist, it's it's something more people should see. Like, I wish it was in some ways a documentary or televised so that people could see, because you can tell people something, but when you show them something, I think that's
Yeah,
the power.
it's so
The
different. Yeah.
powers, and also this thing around your staff being all women. This is the thing about that too. I just want to say this for the record. A lot of times when we do things for Black men, there is a somewhat of a bad response from some people around. Oh, what about everybody else? Or why are
What
you doing
about
something?
ism? Yeah.
Yeah, what
Mhm.
aboutism about? And that only seems to come up when you talk about certain people, like Black men, like something you need to do for Black men. We need more Black men to be seen as fathers and teachers and leaders, because right now the message that society sends is that we're not capable of any of those things. So that's why Black men. That's why Black males. We have to stop sending the message to boys and to men that part of their identity is not being a great father, great teacher, great leader, um, the first character, not the sidekick. You know what I mean? But to have a entire team of Black women who love Black men, right? Like they are doing the work. They make you look good because we know you don't do nothing. Regis,
Listen, these sisters. I was
I'm
just talking
joking.
about it.
Sharif
No,
does a
listen.
lot, you
No, no,
know.
no. Listen. I was just talking about this with our with Dominique House. She's our director of communications, and like my gratitude, which I think is a really important value. Like my gratitude for these sisters and their leadership, and they're so dynamic and creative. It seemed like every day I'm just like, wow, I would have never thought of that in a million years. Like they're doing, they say like, hey, we should do the X. I'm like, I would have never thought about that in a million years, right? Like just their way, and I think it's so important. This is again for diversity. This is another rationale for diversity. Let's put all the racism and sexism and all those things aside. Just the idea of having a dynamic team that has diverse experiences, perspectives that informs their ideas and improves the work, for everybody is just, like what great learning.
Every time I interact with them, I think the same thing. This is a killer team. This is like a great set of people pulled together, and the sum is better than the parts, right? Like when they come together, because they're all impressive separately, but when they come together, this event that you guys pull off every year, and even with the help that you get, has grown over years. It's still a lot of work. I've run these things before, and when I look at this one, I'm like, God, I'm so glad I don't have to. I'm so glad I don't have to plan this out, because this is a lot of work.
Yeah,
Anyways,
shout out for event
yeah,
planning teams. And what, I want to give Josh, the other black man in our org, Josh, appreciate you, man. Thanks for holding us down.
Josh is actually going to be doing a lot at this upcoming event,
Yeah,
because we're
yeah.
going to get a bunch of black men on the record as influencers, as people who use their voice and their power to forward the issue that nobody thinks that we can forward. Like, we always think someone else is supposed to do our thing and save us. And listen, on this thing too about diversity, so I have so many meetings with my organization where you're on Zoom and I'm looking at the thing and I'm like, I have all women. Now they're not all black women. So I just, be clear about that. But I've been
Are you the
accused of,
lone and lonely? Are you the
yes,
only
yes,
man?
yes. Like on so many calls I'm sitting on, it's all women, even with contractors.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
there are times where there are multiple pictures on a screen and it's just me and a sea of women, and each one of them is so good at what they do. Like
Hmm.
like super
Yeah,
black belt competent, and make me better. And I don't mean this to be a sexist. I'm just saying it works out really well for us that we have this caliber of people working for us, because there's no way we'd be able to get done the stuff that we get done
yeah, yeah. Listen,
without
top
them. So
talent, in all shapes and forms, and brothers, we looking for you though. We definitely want to. We need you in our organizations. You know what I
we
mean?
need you, and we need you to lead things. Sharif, you've introduced me to so many dope people that I think, like, your network is super powerful of dope people like William Jackson, who you introduced me to,
Oh my
who
gosh, I
runs
love Will. Yeah,
Village of Wisdom.
yeah,
First of all,
yeah.
people, if you're watching this right now, I interviewed William for one of our Always Learning podcasts, but go and look for this website, Village of Wisdom. It is like one of the best representations of a black nonprofit I've ever seen in my life. The website itself is super impressive. They've had a rebrand recently, and there's nothing like it. I could go on and on, but please just go look at it. It's what a good black nonprofit could look like, that's focused on us.
Bro, and if you're a school leader, district leader, you need to connect with the when Will, right before I was transitioning out, Will and Hewitt and a couple other people visited Shoemaker, and how Will was engaging family. We thought we were engaging families, and we had great, like, we were doing some stuff, but when I saw Will, I was like, oh, that's black belt version.
Hmm.
And I was like,
He's
this is what
brilliant.
we have to incorporate in our orientation, in our training and development, for our staff, like everything. And then, ended up transitioning off, and Hewitt, just so much love for, just Black Teacher, collaborative and how they're thinking about things. And, like, it's so many just dope, dynamic, amazing people out there. I think we got to organize. We just got to organize more, right? Like, and make
Absolutely.
sure we're putting this puzzle piece together in a way that, yeah, that's it. That's it.
It's my word. Comrade Chris is all about the organizing, but there's some other words. Like, if I think about different hats, like organize is one of my main hats. I got to get one.
Yeah, I told all black
This
men
is
like
just
to stop wearing red hats though, because from afar you might just look like a Trumpster. So y'all better be careful
it's
with those
good
red
though. It's
hats out
good
in
though,
those
because
streets.
listen, look. Surprise! I got you.
I got you.
Got you. So from the back, like okay, boom. What you think this was going to be? What you think was about to happen? Make America great? What? Nah, bro, organize. Now, I also need one that says solidarity because I don't think we know what that means, and it's one of the Kwanzaa principles that is very powerful. So we need a hat that says solidarity,
Yeah,
um,
Umoja.
emoja. But you know what? What you just said is giving me a different thought. I'm going to take this away with me. Is that networking? Like when I think about the event that you're doing, when I think about the people you have introduced me to, and all one is more powerful than the next. Like I feel like it would be hard to organize all of them, but it wouldn't be hard for us to network with each other and to be in touch. And like William Jackson, who
And
you
know what
introduced me
each
to,
other are doing so that we,
yes,
can
yes.
leverage,
Yeah, because if
and
I didn't know
connect it.
Village of
Yeah.
Wisdom, I showed my whole team Williams' work. I like told them you have to go look at this, you have to study it. The way that they organize their work and talk about families and work with families is novel and different, and it's spot on. So it's an advancement in the
Yeah. Yeah.
the stuff. That's only because you introduced me,
Yeah.
right? You also
So
introduced me to some other dope people, some black folks in math,
mhm.
some black people in AI. I'm like, damn, Sharif know everybody.
No, listen, that's 30 years of being in the school, man. Like it's just 26 years, but I think, yeah. I mean, but you know what? I think that's that's community, right? Like, and even though we're not in the same cities, we are in a community of mindsets that's pro humanity, pro black, pro health, you know what I mean? Like, we're in that type of community, so it only makes sense that we should be, far more connected than what we are. So
Well,
yeah,
I
and
appreciate you,
I'm
brother,
meeting new
because
people every day. They're just like, yo, that's dope. That's
well, you go so many places.
yeah.
You travel so much, right? Like
Hmm.
I don't never know where you're going to be. Like, oh, I'm in Sweden right now.
Listen, yesterday, past 2 days, I was in Chicago for the third time in 2 weeks. So it was a lot, but I do love parts of Chicago. But anyway, I was with the Spencer Foundation. And I had not interacted with them a whole lot before, but this was a room full of, I'm going to say, mostly vast majority of researchers of color, black, brown, indigenous, Arab, Indian researchers of color, and it was fascinating to hear, you know, and I know a lot of them individually. We know a lot of them individually, whether it's Jarvis Givens, whether it's Travis Bristol, Conrad Guest, right? Like, all these like individuals, but to hear them as a collective pushing and challenge each other to do what you often say, like, don't make black kids the most researched and least taught, right? Like, don't research them. How about coming to practitioners and thinking about, hey, what questions are you asking? How can we support you with like action research, which I think most dope educators are doing. They're doing action research. But now, if you have someone that actually with the resources and deeper skill set and time to partner with you, that's a game changer for Black student achievement, right? And so it was fascinating. So that's another group I think we could really engage with at a different level, Chris.
I just imagine some big summit at some point, like just bringing everybody together who does all these different things. Because we've all sat in these rooms where it's a piece of the puzzle. Like the research is a piece, the practitioners are a piece, the community engagement folks that are doing it really well are a piece. The parents and the parenting and fathering part of this is a cultural piece. Like we need to figure out a way that we share information and learning, not amongst the professionals, amongst the proletariat. That to me is my biggest focus too. Is like how do we make the proletariat the objective of what we are doing, um, not the subject, right? The subject means we're
Yes,
studying them, right? The
hmm.
objective means that it's all about them. It is literally about living and growing within the proletariat.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. Yeah, I'm like, if anybody cancels one of the breakout sessions, like, I really want Dr. Naila Nasir to help us craft a session specifically to replicate what I experienced with them past couple days. Just like hear the research. That's one thing we haven't done with BMEC. We haven't leveraged it. Like, so this time we want to come out with a policy brief, a policy statement out of this, for the next administration, next Secretary of Ed, or, whatever, this next version of January. Like, we want to come out in this November convening with that. It would also be great to come out with the, 3 or 4 research questions that was derived from the community that we want to use. So
people, watch out for the fellowship. I'm not going to tell you what it is or what's going to happen with it or whatever, but I'm telling you, I see a future for all of this, because it's the word itself is actually what I think is missing. We need fellowship with each other. Well, anyways, appreciate you, brother. Thank you for another
always, you
great,
too,
riveting
man.
conversation. This has been another Freedom Friday, and you are still not free. But hopefully you are freer after this hour with Sharif El-Mekki and me, and we will see you next time on the next show. Appreciate y'all.